Black Maid slept on the floor with the twins. The millionaire saw it. And then what happened? Black Maid slept on the floor with the twins. The millionaire saw it. And then what happened? The night was unusually cold for early spring. Rain tapped softly against the wide windows of the luxurious mansion, casting silver ripples across the marble floor. Upstairs, in a dimly lit nursery, a young woman named Grace sat on the edge of a small mattress, not hers, but the one belonging to the millionaire's twin toddlers. She had been hired only 3 weeks earlier, a quiet presence in a house too big for its own warmth. Grace wasn't just their maid, she had quickly become the children's safe place, their laughter's keeper, and their nighttime comfort. That night, one of the twins, Emma, had woken crying from a nightmare. Her brother, Ethan, soon followed, shivering from a fever. Without hesitation, Grace pulled a thin blanket from the linen closet, spread it on the hardwood floor, and laid between their cribs. Every few minutes, she'd reach up, pat their little hands, hum soft lullabies, and whisper, "It's all right, Auntie Grace is here." She didn't want them to feel alone in the dark. She could have called for the night nurse, or left the monitors on and gone back to her own tiny room in the servants' quarters. But she stayed. All night. No pillow, no proper blanket. Just the floor and her devotion. What Grace didn't know was that someone else was awake. Richard Morgan, the millionaire father, had returned late from a business trip and wandered the halls, restless. As he passed by the nursery door, slightly ajar, he stopped. At first, he thought the children had climbed out of their beds, but then his eyes adjusted, and he saw her. There she was, lying curled up on the hard floor, the faint moonlight catching her tired face. One hand rested near Emma's crib, the other near Ethan's, as if she were guarding both of them from the world. For a moment, Richard simply stared. In all his years of wealth and privilege, he had seen expensive nannies, skilled caretakers, and polished staff. But he had never seen this. The next morning, Grace woke with a stiff back but a soft smile. The twins giggled when they saw her stir, and she playfully tickled them before preparing their breakfast. She had no idea that Richard had been watching the night before, and she certainly didn't expect the conversation that was about to happen. Later that day, Richard asked her to meet him in his study. Grace stepped in nervously, clutching her apron. She worried, had she broken a rule by sleeping in the nursery? Was this the end of her job? "Grace," Richard began, his tone unreadable. "I saw you last night." Her heart skipped. "Sir, I didn't mean to." He held up a hand, stopping her. "No. You don't need to explain. I need to ask you something. Why did you sleep on the floor?" Grace hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "Because they were scared. And sick. And sometimes children don't need medicine or lullabies as much as they need to feel that someone is there. I didn't want them to wake up and feel alone." Richard felt something tighten in his chest. In the corporate boardrooms and high-rise deals of his life, he was used to people acting out of personal gain. But Grace's answer was stripped of any agenda, it was pure, simple humanity. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Grace, how long have you been in this line of work?" "Most of my life," she replied softly. "I had to start young, to support my younger sisters back home. I've worked for families who barely noticed me, but, your children, they notice. They love without question. That's rare." For a long moment, the room was quiet except for the rain still pattering against the windows. Then Richard stood, walked over to the large safe in the corner, and pulled out an envelope. "I was going to save this bonus for the end of the year," he said, placing it in her hands, "but after last night, I realized something. My kids don't need the best toys, or the most expensive clothes. They need people who love them. And people like you should never have to choose between caring for children and caring for your own family." Grace opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a check, enough to pay off her family's debts, send her sisters to school, and give them a secure future. Her eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I can't accept this." "You can," Richard interrupted gently, "because it's not just payment. It's a thank you. For teaching me that love doesn't need to be bought, it needs to be shown." The twins barreled into the study then, wrapping themselves around Grace's legs. She bent down, hugging them tightly. Richard stood there, watching this small scene, realizing it was worth more than every deal he had ever closed. From that day on, Grace was no longer the maid. She became part of the Morgan family. She had her own comfortable room near the children, a proper bed, and weekends off to visit her family. But more than anything, she had the assurance that her kindness had not gone unseen. And Richard? He began to see his own life differently. He worked fewer late nights, started reading bedtime stories to the twins himself, and kept reminding himself of the lesson Grace had taught him, that the greatest wealth is not measured in money, but in the love we give freely. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion, like sleeping on the floor for frightened children, can awaken the richest truths in the human heart.